The night started with lights, music, and laughter. Stephen Colbert smiled at the camera, full of his usual energy. The studio audience clapped loudly as he welcomed his special guest. Denzel Washington walked onto the stage, dressed in a sharp, navy blue suit, his steps confident and calm. The applause grew louder. People were excited to see one of Hollywood's most respected actors live on television. Colbert stood up, shook Denzel's hand, and smiled wide. "Ladies and gentlemen, Denzel Washington, the legend himself," Colbert said. The crowd cheered even more, and both men sat down ready to talk. The first few minutes were fun. Colbert asked about Denzel's recent award and joked about his age. Denzel smiled politely and answered in his usual calm and humble style. Then Colbert switched topics to Denzel's latest movie award drama based on true stories of American soldiers. In the Middle East, the movie was already a big hit, with people praising Denzel's performance. Colbert leaned forward, his tone playful. "You really threw yourself into this role? I heard you went through military training for months. Tell me, was it hard pretending to be a soldier while drinking coconut water between takes?" The audience laughed, but Denzel's smile faded just a little. His eyes narrowed, though his voice stayed calm. "I didn't pretend, Stephen. I trained with real veterans, spent time in hospitals with wounded soldiers. I listened to their stories. Some of them didn't make it back home. For me, it wasn't acting, it was honoring them." Colbert shrugged, still grinning. Of course. But let's be honest, you still get to go home to Hollywood after the cameras stop rolling. It's not like you're solving world peace." The room suddenly felt colder. The audience stopped clapping. Denzel leaned forward, his hands folded. Together, his voice steady but sharp. "Respect matters, Stephen. Even on a comedy show. Especially on a comedy show." Colbert, trying to save the moment quickly, said, "Hey, we're just having fun here. People want to laugh." Denzel's expression didn't change. "I didn't come here to be laughed at. I came to talk about real sacrifice, about men and women who gave everything. If you just want to make jokes, I'm in the wrong place." The audience stayed silent. No one knew what to do. Even Colbert seemed uncomfortable, his smile looking weaker. He glanced off camera, maybe at his producers, searching for a way to change the subject. But Denzel was not finished. He continued in a calm but serious voice. "There are young men and women who never came home. There are families still waiting for answers. There are wars started for money, not freedom. I made this movie to shine a light on those truths, not to be part of a late-night joke." Colbert tried to chuckle. "Denzel, people are going to call you too serious after tonight." Denzel didn't smile back. "They've called me worse," he said simply. Slowly, he reached behind his ear, unclipped his microphone, stood up, and adjusted his jacket. The studio crew looked shocked. Some gasped. The camera tried to follow Denzel, but he had already started walking off the stage. "I have nothing more to say here," Denzel added before walking through the curtain and disappearing from the set. The studio was frozen. Colbert blinked, unsure how to react. He tried to smile, but failed. There was no applause, no jokes, just an awkward silence. Colbert looked into the camera and quickly cut to a commercial break. Within minutes, clips of the moment hit the internet. Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube exploded with Denzel's words. "Respect matters. I didn't come here to be laughed at. And there are wars started for money, not freedom." Hashtags like #DenzelWalksOff, #Truth on TV, and #Veterans Deserve Respect began trending. Different news outlets showed different reactions. Some called it a powerful stand. Others said Denzel was too sensitive. But veterans groups quickly posted messages supporting Denzel. They thanked him for speaking truth in front of millions. By midnight, clips of Denzel's walk-off reached over 50 million views. People argued online, but one thing was clear: this wasn't just another celebrity interview. Denzel had turned a comedy show into a serious moment about truth, sacrifice, and respect. The next morning, newspapers ran headlines. Denzel Washington explodes on Colbert when late night turned to real and truth walked off stage. Political commentators started joining the conversation. Some said Denzel was right to call out the system. Others defended Colbert, saying it was just a comedy show. But there was more than just opinions floating online. Small blogs and independent journalists pointed out something strange before. The show Denzel had been seen talking with people linked to military whistleblowers. Some believed Denzel had come to the show with more than just movie promotion in mind. Whispers began about hidden truths, secret deals, and forgotten soldiers. The story was far from over. What started as a simple TV appearance had turned into the first spark of something much bigger. And the world was about to witness it. The morning after Denzel's walk-off, every major TV station had his name flashing across the screen. News. Anchors repeated the same video clip over and over, Denzel standing up, calmly removing his microphone and walking away from Stephen Colbert's desk. Internet headlines screamed, Denzel explodes on live TV, late night meltdown or moment of truth, and Denzel Washington stuns America. But while the media focused on the dramatic moment, something else was happening in the background. Independent journalists began to dig deeper. They noticed a strange pattern. Just 3 days before his appearance, Denzel had visited a private veterans hospital. But the visit had not been publicized. He had also attended a closed-door meeting in Washington, D.C. with several military families and 2 whistleblowers known for exposing military corruption. By mid-afternoon, a European journalist, Alina Kostas, posted a cryptic message on her social media. Denzel was not just promoting a movie. There is a bigger story. Documents coming soon. The post went viral in minutes, with people speculating about what Denzel really knew. Meanwhile, Colbert's team released a short statement, trying to calm the storm. They claimed the interview was meant to be fun, and there was no disrespect intended. But the public wasn't convinced. Comment sections were flooded with angry comments, especially from veterans groups. Many said Denzel had done something brave, something more actors should do, speak the truth no matter how uncomfortable it made people. Denzel himself stayed silent the whole day. Reporters waited outside his house, but he didn't appear. Social media updates, no interviews, only silence. The mystery grew. People wanted to know what pushed a man like Denzel, known for his calm and professional nature, to walk off a stage in front of millions. That evening, Alina Kostas appeared, live on Global News Network. She held a thick folder in her hand, and behind her, there were blurry images of documents. Her voice was steady, her words careful. Tonight, we begin to reveal why Denzel Washington walked off that stage. This is not about a movie. About something much deeper, about how governments, private defense companies, and even media channels have played with the truth for decades. She explained how whistleblowers had given Denzel access to hidden files, documents showing how certain wars had been extended on purpose, how contracts worth billions had been signed in secret, and how veterans were often left without proper care after serving in brutal conditions. Lena didn't stop there. She named 4 well-known politicians who had received secret campaign donations from the same companies that profited from war. She also revealed how Hollywood had been used as a tool to distract the public, glorifying war in movies while ignoring the human cost in real life. Within an hour, her report spread worldwide. News outlets that had first mocked Denzel's reaction began changing their tone. Major newspapers like the New York Times and The Guardian sent investigative reporters to track the story. Social media exploded again, this time with a different energy. People were no longer laughing about a celebrity outburst. They were demanding answers. Veterans groups announced they would hold a rally in Washington, D.C. the next day, calling it March for Truth. Thousands pledged to attend. Popular figures from actors to former soldiers began voicing their support. The story was no. longer about Denzel versus Colbert, had become a national debate on how much the public had been lied to. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, political panic began. Inside the White House, senior advisors argued about how to respond. Some wanted to dismiss the documents as fake. Others warned that denying everything would make things worse. In Congress, opposition parties demanded an urgent hearing to investigate the defense contracts mentioned in Elena's report. Colbert remained silent. His show was scheduled to air as usual, but by late afternoon, sources said multiple sponsors had pulled their advertisements. Activists had also gathered outside the studio, chanting for accountability and respect for soldiers. As night fell, one final event changed everything. Denzel's team released a short video clip on his official account. Denzel sat in a quiet room, dressed simply. His face was serious but calm. "I walked off that stage because I couldn't play along with the lies anymore," he said. "For years, I believed in stories told by people in power. I believed in the roles I played, but when I met those soldiers, when I listened to what they endured, I knew I had to use my voice differently. You deserve the truth, not just entertainment." Within minutes, the video had millions of views. The next morning, the entire world seemed to move differently. Streets in Washington, D.C. filled up early as veterans, students, and ordinary citizens arrived holding banners that read "Respect the truth and no more lies." TV channels around the world had shifted from their usual morning shows to live coverage of the growing protests. Something had changed overnight in Denzel. Washington's quiet words had turned into a loud demand for justice. Inside political offices, phones kept ringing. Senators and congressmen were flooded with calls and messages. Staff members tried to calm the growing anger outside, but it was useless. In the White House, senior officials held emergency meetings. The president was briefed personally, advised to let the storm pass. But the storm was only growing stronger. Meanwhile, Denzel stayed away from cameras. Wasn't doing interviews, but his team kept releasing more documents. Elena Costas continued breaking stories on her independent news channel, showing connections between politicians, defense contractors, and media companies. Every hour, new names appeared, people who had taken bribes, lied to the public, or made profits from unnecessary wars. That evening, Denzel finally broke his silence. He agreed to do one interview only, and it would be live, without cuts or edits, with Elena Costas. Millions of people tuned in. Every major network was forced to broadcast it after public pressure became too strong. Elena welcomed Denzel, her voice steady, her expression serious. "Why are you risking everything?" "Denzel, your career, your life." Denzel looked into the camera, his voice calm but powerful. "Because too many people risked their lives for this country and got nothing in return. Because I sat with mothers who buried their sons while rich men toasted champagne over new contracts. Because truth has no value if it stays hidden." Elena asked him to explain the documents. Denzel spoke clearly, explaining how political leaders, both Republican and Democrat, had signed deals to keep wars going longer than needed. He talked about how soldiers were sent into danger while corporate friends of politicians made millions. He revealed that even some famous actors had been used to sell lies to the public, making war look heroic while veterans came home to broken promises. The audience at home sat in silence, hearing things they had never imagined. Elena showed secret recordings, government officials laughing about how easy it was to distract people using Hollywood stories. She played clips of private conversations where military generals admitted they fought wars they knew were pointless, just to hit political goals. Denzel continued, "I don't care if they call me unpatriotic. I don't care if they call me difficult. I care about truth. And if my career is destroyed because I spoke the truth, so be it." The broadcast lasted nearly an hour. When it ended, people took to the streets in even larger numbers. Hashtags like #TruthMarch and #Justice for Veterans topped global trends. Thousands gathered outside the Capitol. Police were told to stand by, but no violence broke out. The crowds were angry but peaceful, chanting for accountability. Across the ocean, protests broke out in London and Paris. European leaders who had signed defense deals with American companies faced questions from reporters. One British minister canceled all public appearances after journalists demanded answers about documents Denzel had released. Back in America, opposition lawmakers demanded emergency hearings. Senator Clara Morales, a known critic of defense overspending, stood on the steps of the Capitol and made a public speech. "We were lied to. Our soldiers were used. Our people were fooled. This is no longer about politics. This is about justice." The president's spokesperson gave a brief statement, calling the accusations deeply troubling and promising a full investigation. But few believed it. Public trust was broken. Meanwhile, news leaked from inside Colbert's studio. His production team was in chaos. Sponsors were pulling out. Former guests refused to appear on his show. Colbert himself hadn't made any public comment since the incident. Rumors spread that his network was considering a suspension. Inside Denzel's camp, security was tightened. Anonymous threats started arriving, calls, emails, strange vehicles near his home. Elena's team also faced intimidation, but they refused. To stop reporting, Denzel remained calm, focused only on making sure the truth reached the people. That night, one final surprise came. An anonymous source, claiming to be a former intelligence officer, contacted Elena's team. They said there were more documents far worse hidden away. Files that could prove certain wars were started not for defense, but purely for profit. Files that included names of top government officials, both alive and dead, who had misled entire nations. Elena didn't release these files yet, but she hinted during her news show. This is just the beginning. By the end of the day, it was clear to everyone the story was no longer about a movie promotion gone wrong. It was a political earthquake, shaking the most powerful offices in the world. And it had started with one man standing up on live TV, refusing to be silenced. The next few days changed everything. Across America, politicians tried to calm the public, but no one was listening. The streets stayed crowded with people holding signs and chanting for justice. Outside the Capitol building, veterans in uniform stood quietly, holding pictures of fallen friends. In New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and dozens of other cities, people marched for the truth. International protests broke out in Europe, Australia, even parts of the Middle East. Inside the government, panic was growing. News channels reported emergency meetings at the Pentagon, the White House, and Congress. Political commentators admitted they had never seen such anger from the public. Polls showed trust in the government had fallen to the lowest level in history. Denzel Washington's name was everywhere, and his quiet walk-off had turned into a full-scale rebellion against corruption. In Washington, D.C., Congress was forced to respond. Senator Clara Morales, already a supporter of truth movements, demanded an official investigation. She gathered members from both political parties and held a press conference. "These documents are real," she said, holding up a thick file. "This is no longer about opinions or media games. This is about justice for every soldier, every taxpayer, and every citizen who was lied to." The president finally appeared on television, looking tired and worried. He promised full transparency, but his words sounded weak. Reporters shouted questions about the secret war contracts, but security pushed them back. People watching from home shook their heads. They knew excuses when they heard them. Elena Costas kept releasing more files every day. Her independent news channel became the most watched program in the world. She revealed emails between media companies and political advisors, proving that news shows were told which topics to avoid. She showed how Hollywood studios were offered tax breaks if they produced movies that supported military action. Even talk shows like Colbert's had received quiet funding from political groups to mock anti-war voices and celebrate pro-war politicians. Colbert remained silent. His network canceled several of his shows as sponsors disappeared. Anonymous. Sources from inside the network revealed that Colbert was being questioned by company lawyers about what he knew. The comedian who had spent years joking about politics was now trapped inside a real political scandal. In London, Elena's reports caused chaos. British newspapers picked up the story, and members of Parliament demanded answers about their own defense contracts with the United States. Protesters stood outside Parliament chanting, "Truth has no borders." A government minister resigned after being linked to secret oil deals connected to the wars. In Germany, France, and Italy, similar pressure grew. Political parties that had once been ignored suddenly became popular by demanding investigations into war crimes and political corruption. Denzel's words were now translated into dozens of languages, appearing on protest banners across the world. Meanwhile, Denzel stayed out of the spotlight. His lawyers worked day and night to protect him from legal attacks. Powerful people wanted him silenced. Private investigators appeared near his home. Strange cars followed his family. His team reported threats coming from anonymous phone calls. But Denzel was calm. He met with his closest advisors in private. Elena visited him secretly, bringing more evidence from new whistleblowers. They worked quietly, preparing for the next step, a speech that would be broadcast worldwide. Behind the scenes, other celebrities began speaking up. Famous actors, singers, and athletes posted messages of support for Denzel. Many admitted they had been pressured to stay quiet about politics. Some revealed they had been paid to appear at military events or praise political leaders. For the first time, Hollywood's golden image started to crack. Veterans groups announced they would organize the largest peaceful protest in American history, called March for the Forgotten. Millions promised to join. Families of fallen soldiers, wounded veterans, and angry citizens prepared to walk together in Washington, D.C., demanding justice. Inside Congress, the opposition grew stronger. Senator Morales received hundreds of messages from government workers offering to testify. Anonymous sources from the Pentagon leaked more documents to Elena. One file described in shocking detail how false stories were planted in the media before every major military action. The morning of the March for the Forgotten arrived, and the streets of Washington, D.C. overflowed with people from every corner of the country. They came, veterans in their medals, families carrying pictures of lost sons and daughters, young people demanding justice, and ordinary citizens who were tired of being lied to. It wasn't just a protest anymore, it was a movement. Helicopters circled above, filming the biggest peaceful demonstration the city had seen in decades. News reporters, many of whom had ignored stories like this for years, now stood in the crowds, broadcasting every moment. Giant screens were set up in the streets, waiting to broadcast Denzel Washington's promised message. People held banners reading, "No more blood for profit, truth matters," and "Denzel spoke for us." Inside the Capitol, politicians watched nervously. Some had already resigned quietly. Others prepared statements trying to distance themselves from the scandal. Senator Clara Morales stood tall. She had called for an emergency congressional hearing, and today she would demand a full criminal investigation into war profiteering. At exactly noon, the giant screens lit up. Denzel Washington appeared, sitting in a simple room. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a plain shirt. His expression was serious but calm. "I don't speak today as an actor," Denzel began, "but as a citizen, as a father, as a man who refused to stay silent while others suffered." He spoke slowly, making sure every word was clear. He explained how governments and corporations had built a war machine that crushed the truth. How defense companies earned billions while soldiers returned home broken and forgotten. How politicians signed secret contracts and media companies turned war into entertainment. Then he paused, and Elena Costas appeared beside him. Elena took a breath. Today, we will release documents that show exactly how it happened. Names, dates, payments, everything. No more secrets. Together, they explained what was in the files. Secret recordings of defense company meetings, planning false narratives. Private emails where politicians celebrated war contracts, proof of fake. Charities stealing donations meant for veterans. They showed how certain famous media figures, including late-night hosts, had been paid to mock anti-war activists and promote the government's version of events. The crowd stood in complete silence, listening to every word. Elena revealed one more shocking truth: a classified memo written by a former defense secretary admitting that at least 2 wars could have ended years earlier, but were extended because peace was less profitable. The final message came from Denzel. We always say support the troops. But supporting them means telling the truth about why they fight and what they return to. Too many died for lies. Too many families were broken while the rich grew. Richer, today, we take back the truth. When the message ended, the crowd erupted not in violence, but in powerful chants. People cried, hugged, and raised their voices together. Truth, now. Truth now. Echoed through Washington and across social media platforms worldwide. In Congress, Senator Morales walked into the emergency hearing with the documents in her hand. She spoke directly to her fellow lawmakers. We cannot be the government that ignores this. We cannot be the country that silences those who speak out. This is our chance to clean up the system and give justice to those we failed. Live coverage showed other nations reacting. In London, Paris, and Berlin, people took to the streets in solidarity. In Canada and Australia, defense ministers announced immediate reviews of their military spending. A powerful senator in Italy resigned hours after. Elena's documents showed his involvement in shady defense deals at the Pentagon. High-ranking officials were removed from their offices. FBI agents entered the headquarters of 2 major defense contractors with search warrants. Even Hollywood felt the impact. Studios canceled war films in production. And certain celebrities vanished from public appearances after being named in the files. Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert's show was permanently canceled. His final statement was released online, where he admitted, "We joked when we should have listened, laughed when we should have asked questions. I was wrong." But the apology came too late. Back at Denzel's house, his security team kept him safe. Elena, surrounded by bodyguards, continued releasing smaller files day by day. The world wanted more, and they delivered everything. Every name, every deal, every lie. Within a week, congressional hearings became the top story everywhere. Whistleblowers, who had been afraid, finally stepped forward. Veterans who were silenced got their voices back. And families who had lost loved ones finally had a chance to see justice moving forward. Denzel refused every TV interview, every movie offer, and every deal from media companies. He released one final statement before disappearing from public life. "My job was to tell the truth," he said. "The rest is up to you." But his message was not forgotten. Schools began teaching about media manipulation and war profiteering. New laws were proposed in Congress to end secret military contracts. Public opinion had shifted forever in the end. It was not a politician, a journalist, or a general who exposed the truth. It was a man who had simply refused to be part of the lie. Denzel Washington had walked off a stage, and by doing so, walked straight into history. The world was still shaken days after Denzel's final message. The streets remained crowded in many cities, with people refusing to go back home until they saw real change. The March for the Forgotten had broken records. But the movement was no longer just a protest, had become the beginning of something bigger. Governments across the world faced angry citizens who were not ready to be fooled again. In Washington, D.C., the halls of power were filled with fear. Congressional hearings continued daily, broadcast live to millions of viewers. Senator Clara Morales became a household name. She stood tall in every session, pushing back against high-ranking officials who had gotten away with corruption for years. She demanded clear answers, holding up documents released by Denzel and Alina as proof of political crimes. In one hearing, she faced the former Secretary of Defense, asking him directly why young American soldiers were sent to die, when peace agreements were already on the table. The room went silent as the man stumbled over his words. Clips of the moment spread across the internet, adding more fuel to the fire at the Pentagon. More arrests followed. The FBI and military police uncovered hidden contracts, missing billions of dollars and secret bonuses given to defense company executives during wartime. Several top generals resigned under pressure. Investigations spread to private companies who had earned huge profits from military supplies that were never delivered or sold at 10 times their real cost. Alina Costas continued her work, releasing reports every day with the public. Supporting her, no one could silence her channel. New whistleblowers kept coming forward, some of them high-ranking officials who confessed to the lies they had helped spread. Alina revealed secret government instructions sent to popular news channels, showing how stories were edited to protect the image of the military and politicians. Even public schools were part of the manipulation, with textbooks written to hide the truth about wars. In Hollywood, studios tried to recover their reputation. Several producers publicly apologized for supporting fake narratives in their movies. Famous actors admitted they had been pressured to play roles that glorified war. Some retired completely, saying they could no longer be part of the system. New independent filmmakers appeared, vowing to make films based on truth, not propaganda. Across the Atlantic, the crisis grew. In Europe, politicians who had made secret deals with American defense contractors were now being investigated. The British Prime Minister gave a national address, promising full transparency after documents linked several members of parliament to corrupt defense spending. In France, the president fired his defense minister. In Germany, massive protests pushed the government to pass emergency reforms, banning secret contracts with private defense companies. Meanwhile, Denzel Washington remained out of sight, living quietly with his family. Journalists camped outside his home, but he never appeared. His legal team issued only short statements, reminding everyone that Denzel had no political ambitions. He simply wanted justice. Even from the shadows, his influence remained powerful. His walk-off had started the largest global political shift in decades. Inside Congress, Senator Morales led a vote to create new laws aimed at ending war profiteering. She proposed the Truth in Defense Act, which would stop secret contracts, protect whistleblowers, and guarantee proper support for veterans. She promised the American people that the corruption exposed by Denzel would never happen again. Her speech on voting day was broadcast live. She said, "This is our moment to fix what has been broken for too long. The truth should never be hidden, and the voices of our veterans should never be ignored. We owe it to the fallen, to the wounded, and to every citizen who believed in honesty." The Truth in Defense Act passed with a huge majority. Citizens across the country celebrated in the streets. Bells rang and people cheered. The public finally felt their voices had forced real change. That evening, Alina received an anonymous package, a final batch of classified files. Inside, there was evidence connecting the corruption to 2 former presidents. Secret payments, fake speeches, and hidden military actions were all detailed clearly. The weeks turned into months, but the storm that Denzel Washington started never settled. Around the world, the effects of his actions continued to grow stronger. Streets in major cities stayed active with peaceful demonstrations. People who had never protested before were now standing side by side with veterans. Teachers, nurses, and students demanding fairness, honesty, and respect from their governments. In Washington, D.C., new laws passed through Congress at record speed. Senator Clara Morales, now the most trusted political leader in America, pushed through reforms that had once seemed impossible. The Truth in Defense Act was only the beginning. Soon, Congress banned private companies from lobbying for war contracts. Defense spending became fully transparent, and media companies were forced to disclose every political connection they had. Multiple politicians resigned after being exposed. By Alina Kostas. High-profile arrests followed. Former senators, military generals, and corporate CEOs were sentenced to years in prison for fraud, corruption, and conspiracy. Courtrooms were packed with reporters capturing the faces of powerful people who once believed they were untouchable. Elena's news channel became the #1 source for investigative reporting worldwide. She continued breaking stories, holding leaders accountable. Her work inspired young journalists across the world. Independent media grew stronger, while corporate-controlled channels lost millions of viewers. People no longer trusted the traditional media. They wanted the truth raw and unfiltered. In Hollywood, a new wave of filmmaking took over. Studios that had once produced endless war movies now funded documentaries about real hero soldiers, medics, and peace activists. Young actors followed Denzel's example, refusing to be part of propaganda. Famous directors announced bold projects that told the hidden stories of wars, corruption, and the fight for justice. Internationally, the changes were even greater. In Britain, Parliament was forced to pass stricter laws on defense spending. Several European leaders lost their positions after investigations exposed their involvement in secret deals. Protests across Paris, Berlin, and Rome pushed their governments to end old military contracts and focus on rebuilding damaged communities instead of starting new wars. Veterans who had been forgotten for years finally received the care they deserved. New government programs were launched to provide them with housing, healthcare, and education. Memorials were built in their honor not to glorify war, but to remind future generations of the cost of political lies. And what about Stephen Colbert? His career ended silently. The man once celebrated for his jokes disappeared from public life. His name became a cautionary tale about what happens when comedy becomes a shield for cruelty. Through all of this, Denzel Washington remained quiet. He never returned to Hollywood. He refused every interview and declined every award. His team shared small updates, letting the world know that Denzel was safe, living a simple life with his family, far from cameras and noise. But people never forgot him. His picture appeared in homes, schools, and public squares. His words, "Respect matters," became part of history books. Teachers used his example to explain the importance of courage and integrity. Artists painted murals of him standing tall, walking off that stage not in anger, but in quiet dignity. Senator Clara Morales gave a speech on the 1-year anniversary of the March for the Forgotten. In front of the Capitol with thousands listening, she said, "We were asleep, comfortable in our distractions. It took one man's quiet refusal to wake us up. We will never go back to silence." The world slowly became better. People stayed, alert, ready to speak out when they saw injustice. Young leaders rose from the streets, running for office with promises of honesty and fairness. New soldiers were taught not just to follow orders but to question, to protect their nation with pride but to never be used for profit. Historians called it the Denzel shift, the moment one man's small action turned into global change. Books were written about it. Movies were made, but this time with truth at their center. The people reclaimed their voice, and the powerful were forced to listen. In the quiet hills of his private home, Denzel sometimes walked through his garden, watching the sunset. He didn't need applause or fame. He didn't need to be on television. He had done something much bigger than any movie could offer. Had reminded the world that dignity was more important than popularity, that truth was stronger than power, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was simply to stand up, walk away from lies, and speak with honesty. And because of that, generations to come would live in a world where truth mattered again.